Hey everyone, welcome to Anita's Joint, hashtag extendAJoint, where every day is Payday, baby. And we are continuing to read the book, Number Games. We're continuing to read the book, Number Games, 9/11 to Coronavirus by Zachary K. Hubbard. Feel free to check out his YouTube channel on Gematria Effect News 22 and Gematria Effect Sports. Shout out to you, Zach. I appreciate the knowledge that you have continued to share with everyone, and I'm very grateful for you to read this book to the people. You know what I'm saying? I hope everyone's been well. You know what I'm saying? We're gonna dive into some of these codes, these gematria codes, and just look at the fugazi fuckery that continues to go on and under our noses. But now we're being able to see what's in plain sight in front of us, right? So let me, further ado, let me go ahead and share my screen. Let's get it started. All right, cool. So we are reading chapter 10. Hold on. Okay, let me get to chapter 10. Shoot, we might read chapter 10 and chapter 11 today. Okay. Plug, plug everything in. My bad. Over here. Plug that in. Hey! You're making all the noises out there. Bullshit. Alright. Chapter 10, The Rockefeller Foundation's 2010 Coronavirus Clue. Before we get to the Rockefeller Foundation's writing from 2010 that gave away the very well planned and thought out coronavirus pandemic, the same one we're currently living out, I want to revisit something. In concluding the ninth chapter, we discussed the encoding of 113, a number corresponding with coronavirus, a number corresponding with the gematria of coronavirus pandemic, as well as the date of the pandemic that was declared, March 11, 2020. March 11, 2020. A date often written 11/3, not unlike 113. To add to our list, Rockefeller's foundation also sums to 113 with reverse Pythagorean. It reminds us of how the World Trade Centers opened on November 3rd, 2014, a little more than 13 years after the Twin Towers' demise. A date that can be written 11/3 as well. As you know, the One World Trade Center replaced the World Trade Center, two became one, a project proposed and intentionally financed by the Rockefeller family that ended with tragedy when it crumbled down on September 11, 2001. Regarding November 3rd, in the early 2020s, Donald Trump was asked if he might move the presidential election from November 3rd, 2020, because of the threat of the coronavirus, to which he responded by saying no and adding that it's a good number, referring the date, or referencing the date. Imagine what he could have meant by that. A Scottish interest. Imagine what he could have meant by that. Being of Scottish ancestry, Uh, in case you haven't forgotten, Scottish sums to 113 with simple English. For another thought, on March 11th, 2002, a date that can also be written 11/3, the tribute in light began, filming the New York skyline with two massive beams of light that were that were to remember the fallen towers from 6 months earlier. I bring these up to I bring these up to begin the chapter because the Rockefeller Foundation was launched in 1913, 4 years after Walter Reed Army Medical Center was opened in Washington, D.C., the land of the Scottish Rite, on a campus that was 113 acres in size. In addition to the Rockefellers having much history and influence in the nation's capital, the greater parallel is that the hospital, Walter Reed, is named after a yellow fever researcher, and the Rockefeller Foundation got their feet wet in the vaccine business, attempting to solve the same illness. Let us not forget that 113 is the 30th prime and vaccine sums to 30 with Pythagorean Gematria. And for another reminder, the Clyde X simulation, also equating to 113, was centered on the primary goal of developing a vaccine and distributing it to the world's entire populace. It was put on by Johns Hopkins University, located just outside of Washington D.C., also equating to 113. Let us not forget this simulation took place 666 days before the pandemic was declared, connecting to the fact that vaccination sums to 666 in the Sumerian Gematria. Same with mandatory. At the same time, New York, summoning to 666 in Sumerian Gematria, hosted Event 201, the simulation that was a continuation of Clyde X, and that was also focused on developing and distributing a vaccine to solve the pandemic for the people of the world. In light of the coronavirus pandemic and the influence of the Rockefeller family and their foundation, it is interesting to look back on May of look back to May of 2010. In addition, the Rockefeller Foundation released a document entitled "Scenarios for the Future of Technology and International Development." The title sunk to 907 with reverse simple English, the 155th prime number, the latter number corresponding with coronavirus, as well as singularity. It also summed to 313 with reverse Pythagorean, the 65th prime number, the latter number corresponding with pandemic, reminding that 65 million killed in the reminding of the 65 million killed in the Event 201 simulation, and the CARES Act being passed by the U.S. Senate for the world's big bankers. 65 days from Donald Trump gloating about the World Trade to the Economic Forum. As a reminder, equates to six. As a reminder, CARES Act equates to 56 and 70, same as coronavirus. And speaking of 56, the Rockefeller, and speaking of the number 56, the Rockefeller Foundation document we were about to dissect was prepared with the help of the Global Business Network, summoning to 263 with simple English, the 56 prime, making them a perfect partner for the foundation. And on the subject of 263, as another reminder, the three planes that impacted building on the subject of 263, as another reminder, the three planes that impacted buildings on September 11, 2001, flights 11, 77, and 175 add up to 263, and the Rockefellers were behind the World Trade Centers. All right. On the subject of 263, if you want to understand how the world elite. Oh shit. On the subject of 263, if you want to understand how the world's elite have truly mocked us in the time of coronavirus, look up March 26, 2020 cover of The Economist that says everything's under control. You'll see that it depicts the hand of God holding a leash that is around the neck of a masked person who's walking their own leash dog that also has a mask over its snout. What? What the fuck? On the subject of 263, if you want to understand how the world elites have truly mocked us in this time of coronavirus, look up March 26 cover of The Economist. We're gonna start look. I want to start looking at some of these things. Cover, economics, economics. Oh, okay, wow. Look at this. I share. Everything's under everything's under control. The man, a hand with a leash on a masked man, and then a leash of a dog on a mask. How fucked up. That's great. Exactly. Okay. You will see it depicts a hand of God holding a leash that is around the neck of of a masked person who's walking their own leash dog, who also has a mask over its snout. In addition to the date being written 26/3, like 263, the 56 prime, the economist equates to 56 with Pythagorean Gematria. At the same time, the title of the cover, Everything's Under Control, equates to 311, much like the date that the pandemic was declared, March 11th. Furthermore, the title equates to 121, similar to January 21st, when coronavirus was confirmed outside the mainland China, and reminding us that Revelations equates to 121, and accepting the mark of the beast. Part of the story of Revelation is much part of the plan, very much part of the plan and coming agenda that we are being made to live out as people. Moving on and getting to the topic at hand, within the document, Scenarios for the Future of Technology and International Development, it laid out four potential scenarios for the future of global development in a technology world based. Tech Technological. It says it laid out four potential scenarios for the future of global development in a technology based world. Okay. Those four scenarios were titled and captured as follows. One, lockstep. Lockstep. A world of tighter top-down government control and more authoritarian leadership with limited innovation and growing citizen pushback. Two, hack attack. An economical and economically unstable and shock-prone world in which governments weaken criminals thrive, and dangerous innovations emerge. 3. Clever together. A world in which highly coordinated and successful strategies emerge for addressing both urgent and entrenched worldwide issues. 4. Smart scramble. An economically depressed world in which individuals and communities develop localized makeshift solutions to a growing set of problems. As you can gather, the lockstep and hack attack scenarios are currently playing out at the time of writing this book, with authoritarian top down orders being given by world governments, requiring citizens to do things such as stay at home, wear masks, obey curfews, while at the same time, dangerous innovations are emerging, pushed by organized crime, that is big governments, including the surveillance and body tracking technology systems discussed in the last chapter. Unfortunately, these scenarios of clever together and smart scramble aren't taking place at the extent they should, and that is because as a people we have been raised to compete with one another rather than cooperate with one another. It is to say we don't know how to get along as well as we should to be able to, and it is something we must work on. Many of us have also been made dependent on others rather than self reliant and able. These problems are largely due to education, more like socialization, many of us have received, and the culture we have been raised in, both being insufficient and lacking of terms of teaching good values and common decency. That said, if the government failed, I imagine in time those who survived the chaos would learn to unite and work together because it would be the only way forward, the human way forward, at least I would hope. Coming back to the document, it is coming back to the document. This is what is written word for word in the larger lockstep scenario section that was published in May of 2010. In 20, it published in May of 2010. In 2012, the pandemic that had the world had been anticipating for years finally hit. Unlike 2009's H1N1, the new influenza strands originating from wild geese was extremely virulent and deadly. Even the most pandemic prepared nations were quickly overwhelmed with the virus. Oh, even the most prepared nations were quickly overwhelmed with the virus when the virus staked around the world, infecting nearly 20% of the global population and killing 8 million in just 7 months. The majority of them healthy young adults. The pandemic also had a deadly effect on economies. International mobility of people and goods screeched to a halt, debilitating industries like tourism and breaking global supply chains. Even locally, normally busting, bustling shops and office buildings sat empty for months, devoid of both employees and customers. From the same section, it also reads, however, a few countries did fare better, China in particular. The Chinese government quick imposition and enforcement of mandatory quarantine for all citizens, as well as its instant and near hermetic sealing off of all borders, saved millions of lives, stopping the spread of the virus far earlier than the other countries, and enabling a swifter post-pandemic uh, recovery. As of May 2020, China has been as of May 2020, China is being complimented for its quick and mandatory lockdown of citizens, and in the U.S., we're being told China's rate of new cases for the virus is far below that of the United States. that was slower to lock down and more lenient. In other words, the simulation was pretty spot on, including this part. During the pandemic, nations leaders around the world flexed their authority and imposed outright rules and restrictions, from the mandatory wearing of face masks to body temperature checks at the entries of communal spaces like train stations and supermarkets. Even after the pandemic faded, this more authoritarian control and oversight of citizens and their activities stuck and even intensified. In order to protect themselves from the spread of increasingly global problems from pandemics and transnational terrorism to environmental crisis and rising poverty, leaders around the world leaders around the world took a firmer grip on power. And no doubt we can rest assured this is exactly what will happen unless we do something about it. The document then goes on. At first, the notion of more controlled world. Oh shit! At first, the notion of a more controlled world gained wide acceptance and approval. Citizens willingly gave up some of their sovereignty and their privacy to more paternalistic states in exchange for greater safety and stability. Citizens were more tolerant and even eager for top down direction and oversight, and national leaders had more latitude to impose order in the ways they saw fit. In developed countries, this heightened oversight took many forms. Biometric IDs for all citizens, for example, a tighter regulation of key industries whose stability was deemed vital to national interest. Shit, that's some crazy shit. Yeah, they already got it. There's already like I think I told y'all last time. I've already seen videos on YouTube of people being able to unlock doors with the chip underneath their hand in different countries. So I mean, it's crazy. But with the technology that they plan to outroll, they want us to merge with AI. They want us to be okay with being computer, right? All right. The details. The details of the scenario are astonishing to the look. The details of the scenarios are astonishing to look at in the midst of what we're living out. Even mentioning ID 2020 through the language of biometric IDs, something that went into development by the Rockefeller Foundation shortly after the proposed scenario, and partnering with Microsoft in its development. The company once headed by the man who has a foundation of his own, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, like the Rockefeller Foundation, claims to be about humanitarianism. Oh, human, got Anita in there too, my man. Humanitarianism. Well, it's pretty much human terrorism. They're trying to kill us. But, anyways, but really appears to be about wealth and power creation off the projects he supports and convinces world governments to get behind and spend for. Aside from the year 20, Aside from the year 2012 used in this scenario, as opposed to 2020 and a higher death toll caused by birds instead of bats, this simulation described to be what is taking place in the world right now. The same world where it has been reported on June 4th, 2020, the Rockefeller types left by Jeff Bezos had gained 565 billion more in wealth as results of the pandemic, and that's only just the beginning. And that was only just beginning. This is because this scenario, no doubt, was the chosen path forward by the world elites that include the Rockefeller Foundation and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, as well as the names you don't know, because they lurk in the shadows. Something will touch more ahead in the chapters. Something will touch more ahead in the chapters where we discuss Bill Gates and his decade of vaccine plan, as well as other things. All being it's so crazy. This is all being played out in front of us. The simulation. And you gotta be strong. You gotta be calm. You gotta be cool. You gotta be collected. You gotta know that bitch, we're immortal. You know what I'm saying? And you gotta know that you're protected, because you know what I'm saying. You know what the fuck. You know, right? So all the people that don't tune in to source, all the people that are not seeking the truth within self, and then finding other people like me and other people, because there's a lot of us, right? All those people that are not, fuck, don't act like we didn't tell them. Don't act like we were not presented in front of these people. Don't act like we did not show up for you. I showed up for myself first, and you came through. You know what I'm saying? So, as you consider this level of planning and detail, and detail, keep in mind the same philanthropic philanthropic group, the Rockefeller Foundation. It's derived from the same family that forced the World Trade Centers on New York's. Oh, excuse me. Excuse me a second. As you consider this level of planning and detail, keep in mind the same philanthropist group, the Rockefeller Foundation, is diverged from the same family that forced the World Trade Centers on New York City decades before September 11, 2001, for the served purposes of locking them down, only as a symbol to push forward their new world order agenda, as they did. On the subject, please research Aaron Russo's film America, Freedom, America, Freedom to Fascism, where he discussed how he witnessed firsthand a member of the Rockefeller family speaking about the events of 9/11 years before they transpired. And if you don't know the history of how the construction of the World Trade Centers came about, they were proposed by a the Rockefeller family at the time when office space was vacant in New York, and landlords were already struggling to get the desired amount of rent for their tenants due to many vaccines and bargains in the city. To many vacancies and bargains in the city. Thus, the last thing they wanted were new buildings bigger than any city. Thus, the last thing they wanted were new buildings bigger than any before in the city, full of office space, exactly what the World Trade Centers were. On the subject of bats, the differing detail from the lockstep scenario and Rockefellers a big money and the Rockefellers a big money family, just like that of Bruce Wayne and Batman. It is worth pointing out that on February 3rd, 2020, the U.S. Mint released a new quarter. For the first time ever, the design was a fruit bat. Not by chance. Fruit bat equates to 56 with reverse Pythagorean gematria, similar to how coronavirus sums to 56 with Pythagorean, same as Rockefeller. And the news was poignant at the same time. Experts were explaining how the coronavirus likely came from bats, just as the killer pandemic does from the film Contagion. For the record, fruit bat also sums to 34 with Pythagorean Gematria, and it released on the 34th day of the year, February 3rd, 2020. Adding insult to injury, the designer of the new quarter was Richard Masters, summoning to 222 with reverse simple English, corresponding with the long list of 222 rituals you learned about in the third chapter, including Wuhan coronavirus summoning to 222 and the coronavirus pandemic being declared 222 weeks after September 11th, 2001. An event also had to do a lot with money, as I wrote about in my first book. In other words, the new quarter was not a coincidence, but instead was what I call coincidence. Oh, cool. So what he said, wait, cool. In other words, the new quarter was not a coincidence, but instead was what I called coincidence programming. Okay. A tact of mainstream media regularly scheduled program. If you pay attention, the mainstream media is often presenting stories that seem related, but are described by mainstream as being only coincidental. It says, if you pay attention, the mainstream media is often presenting stories that seem related, but are described by the mainstream as being only coincidental or only coincidental. Fucking A, whatever. Such as the quarter and the virus. And do I dare add that the news about the quarter was first broken by outlets such as US Today on January 10th, 2020. That date can be written 1/10, not unlike 1110. The number connecting to the subname Rockefeller equating to 1110, 110, sorry, or 110. This the same as prophecy and reminding us how the World Trade Centers were 110 stories tall and how a span of 110 days from their demise. The movie Pearl Harbor, released only for the attacks of 9/11 to be referred to as the new Pearl Harbor, it reminds us that if you look into the history of cinema, there has always been big money behind it, especially that of industries who are interested in using cinema to help sell products, as well as culture. The latter being so that their products become more enticing. And when you think industry, you think Rockefeller. And when you think cinema and themes, you might acknowledge that for the last 20 centuries there have been many post-apocalyptic titles preparing us for the time of Draconian Draconian world that is being built around us, the Draconian world. Hey, what's up? Hey, you came in on, it said, it's a tier customer. When I look, you commented at 222, but right now it's 227 right now. But what's up, fam? How are you? Shout out to the Soul Group. I hope you're doing well. Shout out to everyone that is tuning in. Some crazy stuff. Okay, where are we at? To finish? We're at to finish. Okay. Chapter 10 was pretty fast. Okay. To finish, I should mention the deaths of John D. Rockefeller, the man who made the family name what it is. and David Rockefeller, who spearheaded the building of the World Trade Centers in New York. There is a clear parallel through a very familiar number. John D. Rockefeller died May 23rd, 1937, a date with 84 numerology, and David Rockefeller died March 20th, 2017, 84 days before his June 12th birthday. And in light of Ignatius of Loyola dying in 1556, emphasized on the 56 and the Rockefeller connection to 56, let us not forget Ignatius of Loyola died 84 days before his birthday as well. In the case of John D. Rockefeller, he died on the 143rd day of the year, corresponding with the reverse Pythagorean Gematria of Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, and David Rockefeller died on March 20th, or 3/20, the spring equinox, having a reverse simple value of 84. Furthermore, the date appears similar to the number 320, and Roman Catholic Church equates to 320 with reverse simple English. If you're a sport buff, you might as well recall how the big three of the Cleveland Cavaliers, LeBron James, Kyrie Irving, and Kevin Love, became the first teammates to combine for 101 points in a game, the night before the death of David Rockefeller at age 101. A stat that matters because the Rockefeller family came to power in Cleveland. For the last nugget on the Rockefeller family, look up the cover of Newsweek from April 3rd, 1963, the 93rd day of the year, and it has a date with 93 numerology as well. Let's see. Newsweek, cover of Newsweek. Let's see. Okay, April 3rd. (1967) cover. Okay, I'll show you. It says this. Okay, April 3rd. It says, for the last nugget on the Rockefeller family, look up the cover of Newsweek from April 3rd, 1967, the 93rd day of the year, and a date with 93 numerology as well. David Rockefeller, summoning to 93 with reverse Pythagorean, is on the cover, reminding us that the 93 World Trade bombings. In the article, he discussed the future of banking and the World Trade Centers that, of course, would be bombed in 1993 and were reportedly struck by the second flight on September 11, 2001 at 9:03 a.m., but not hit by Flight 93 that crashed in Shanksville. And for another reminder of the relevance of 93, the structure that now stands where the World Trade Center once did is one World Trade Center equating to 93 with Pythagorean Gematria. Oh, shit. Okay, so that's the cover of it. So that's David Rockefeller, the era in baking. Very interesting. Let me get back. All right. I'm going to read that again. I'm going to read the last section again. For the last nugget of the Rockefeller family, look up the cover of Newsweek from April 3rd, 1967, the 93rd day of the year, and the date with 93 numerology as well. David Rockefeller summoning to 93 with reverse Pythagorean is on the cover, reminding us of the 93 World Trade Center bombings. In that article, he discussed the future of banking and the World Trade Centers of the World Trade Centers. That, of course, would be bombed in 1993. Emphasis on the 93, and were reportedly struck by the second flight on September 11th, 2001 at 9:03 a.m., but not hit by Flight 93 that crashed in Shanksville. And for another reminder of the relevance of 93, the structure that now stands where the World Trade Centers once did is One World Trade Center, equating to 93 with Pythagorean Gematria. And let us not forget the number 93 is encoded in Wuhan coronavirus because it is a number symbolizing the keepers of time. Saturn and the Sun, as you know, are Saturn and the Sun, as you know. All of these rituals are time-based. Plus, the magazine cover is from the year 67, the 19 prime. And as you know, chaos sums to 19, and Wuhan equates to 67, and Newsweek sums to 666 with reverse Sumerian. Okay. All right. And that is chapter 10. That is chapter 10, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and read chapter 11. Okay. So I'll be back in give me like 10 minutes. Okay. But thank you, everyone, for tuning in for this chapter. And I'll catch you on the next one. All right. Deuces.